The Silent Encounter. The great city of Veilon was alive with shining towers and silver bridges, a place where alien billionaires ruled and common workers walked in silence. Among those towers stood the mansion of Lady Serenia, one of the richest and most powerful aliens in the sector. Inside her mansion, everything glittered. The walls were covered with glowing crystals, the halls filled with servants who bowed their heads whenever she passed. She had money, power, and influence. Yet her heart was not at peace. Because her only daughter, little Ilara, was sick, doctors from across the galaxy had come. Alien healers with strange tools and advanced machines had promised cures, but every promise ended in disappointment. Ilara grew weaker each day, her skin pale, her laughter gone, her eyes heavy with sadness. Lady Serenia, who could buy entire starships with a single order, could not buy her daughter's smile back. One evening, as the stars glowed outside, Serenia walked quietly down the servant halls, her mind heavy. It was then that she stopped because she heard something unusual. A gentle voice humming a simple human song. It was coming from the nursery. Slowly, Serenia opened the door and looked inside, her breath caught. There, sitting on the floor beside Ilara's bed, was a human janitor. He was not dressed like a doctor or a noble. He wore plain clothes. His hands were rough from cleaning floors, yet his movements were soft, his eyes kind. He was holding a small cloth toy and making it dance to make Ilara smile. And to Serenia's shock, Ilara was smiling. It was faint, but real. Her small hand reached for the toy, her eyes brighter than they had been in months. Serenia did not move. She stood in the shadows, watching, her heart beating faster. She had hired this human only for simple cleaning work. Like many of her kind, she thought humans were too simple, too weak, too unimportant. Yet here he was, giving her daughter something no one else could. The human noticed her finally. He quickly stood, bowing awkwardly. "Forgive me, Lady Serenia," he said softly. "I only wished to comfort her. She seemed so lonely." For a moment, Serenia wanted to scold him, to remind him of his place, but the words would not come. Instead, she asked, "What is your name, human?" "My name is Daniel," he answered, his eyes steady though humble. "I am sorry if I overstepped." Ilara's small voice broke the silence. "Mother, can Daniel stay?" Her weak hand still holding the toy, her eyes filled with hope. Serenia felt something stir inside her chest, a conflict between pride and love. She knew the council of her people would mock her if they discovered a human servant sitting by her daughter's side. But she also knew she had just seen her daughter smile for the first time in many weeks. She nodded slowly. "Yes, Daniel may stay," she said, her voice lower than usual. From that night, Daniel became more than just a janitor. He cleaned quietly in the day, but in the evenings he sat by Ilara's bed, telling small stories, showing her how to fold shapes from scraps of paper, humming old human songs. The mansion's halls had always been silent, but now soft laughter began to echo again. The other servants whispered in shock, some with disapproval, others with quiet wonder. Never before had a human been allowed so close to the family of a billionaire. Yet Serenia kept watching in secret, her sharp alien eyes catching every detail, and every night she asked herself, how was it possible? How could a simple human give her child something that the richest doctors in the galaxy could not? One evening, she entered the room again, this time not hiding. Daniel was helping Ilara sip warm broth, his large hands steady, his expression gentle. Serenia stepped closer and asked, "Why do you care so much for a child who is not your own?" Daniel looked up, his voice quiet. "Because she is a child, Lady Serenia, and every child deserves care. Titles and wealth do not change that." His words struck her like a storm, simple yet filled with truth. She had spent her life among nobles and merchants, people who spoke in twisted promises and empty praise, but never had she heard something so pure from one who owned nothing. That night Serenia could not sleep. She sat by her window, the stars shining cold above. Questions filled her mind. Had her people been blind about humans? Had she been blind? And why did her heart feel less heavy every time she thought of the human janitor's kind eyes? The next morning she walked into the nursery again, and for the first time in weeks she saw Ilara sitting upright, weak but smiling, Daniel sitting beside her. In that silent moment, Serenia felt a change begin, not just in her child's health but in her own world. Something had shifted, something dangerous, something powerful, and she wondered with both fear and hope what would happen next. The child's smile. The days that followed were unlike anything the mansion had known before. The great halls were still polished and silent. The servants still hurried with their work. Yet in one room everything had changed because Ilara, the fragile daughter of Lady Serenia, had begun to smile again. It started with small things. Her lips curved when Daniel folded strange shapes from scraps of paper, little stars and birds that floated on the air when he blew gently. The child laughed when he made silly faces or told human stories about rain and fields and rivers. Things the alien girl had never seen. At first, Lady Serenia thought it was only a passing moment, but every evening she returned to the nursery, and every evening she found her daughter brighter, stronger, her weak hands now clapping softly when Daniel sang a tune. The alien doctors who visited were shocked. They found her heartbeat steady, her energy slowly returning, but none of their advanced medicines explained the change. They spoke in confused tones, and some whispered that the child had been touched by human strangeness. Word spread quickly. In the mansion, the staff whispered in kitchens and corridors, "The child is healing, but not by alien science, by a human janitor." Their voices carried both awe and fear. One night, Lady Serenia sat near the bed herself, watching. Ilara lay against the pillows, her eyes fixed on Daniel. "Tell me another story," she asked softly. Daniel nodded, his voice low and calm. "This one is about the first time humans built a small ship and crossed the stars. We were afraid, we were weak, but we still tried." Ilara listened, wide-eyed, and when he finished, she smiled with a light Serenia had almost forgotten. "One day I want to see stars too," the child whispered. Serenia felt her throat tighten. She had power. She had armies, but she could not give her daughter that same smile. It was this human, this man with nothing but kind hands and old stories, who had given life back to Ilara. Later, as Daniel left the room, Serenia stopped him. "Why do you tell her these things? She does not need human myths." Daniel's eyes were steady. "Because hope is stronger than medicine, Lady Serenia. She needs to believe she can rise, that tomorrow can be brighter than today." His words echoed in her mind long after he was gone. Hope. It was such a simple word, but in her world of wealth and cold politics, it was almost forgotten. The next morning, Ilara surprised everyone. She tried to stand, her legs weak but moving. The servants gasped. Serenia's heart raced. Daniel knelt beside her, steadying her carefully, not rushing, letting her try. For a moment, Ilara stood, her small body trembling, and then she fell back into Daniel's arms, laughing. "I stood, Mother. I stood," she cried. Tears burned in Serenia's eyes. She turned, quickly so no one would see, for she was a billionaire, a leader, never allowed to show weakness. But in that instant her pride cracked. She realized her daughter's laughter meant more than all her fortune. By now the whispers had grown into rumors beyond the mansion. Nobles in their tall towers spoke with disbelief. "The alien billionaire lets a human care for her child." Some mocked. "It is shameful." Others said, "It is dangerous." A few even warned, "Humans are cunning. He must have a hidden plan." Serenia heard all of it, but each time she returned home and saw her daughter's glow, the doubts faded. Still, at night she asked herself questions she had no answer for. Who truly was this man, Daniel? Why did his eyes sometimes hold shadows when he thought no one watched? What was the story he never told? One evening, as Ilara slept, Serenia approached Daniel directly, her voice sharper than before. "You are not only a janitor, are you?" Daniel hesitated, his gaze lowering. "I once was more, before the war, before everything was lost," he answered quietly. But he said no more. That silence only deepened the mystery. Serenia wanted to press. But for the first time in her life, she chose patience. She would wait because the truth would come. Meanwhile, Alara's smile became a symbol inside the mansion, a fragile light in a house that had once been filled with coldness. Even the servants began to soften. Some even whispered thanks to Daniel when Serenia was not near but far away. In the higher courts of their alien empire, rumors had also reached the ears of the council. Powerful beings who hated the idea of humans gaining respect. They saw Serenia's choice not as kindness, but as rebellion, and rebellion was dangerous. In her private chamber, Serenia sat alone, staring at the stars beyond the glass wall. Her daughter's laughter still ringing in her ears. She knew the whispers were growing into storms, and storms in her world could destroy more than just reputations. Yet when she remembered Alara's smile, she whispered to herself, "Let them whisper," because no amount of power could replace that smile, and no fear of the council could make her forget who had given it back. And so, the bond between a human janitor and a fragile alien child grew stronger, unseen by the world outside, but destined to shake the galaxy before long. The alien court's disapproval. The change in Lady Serenia's mansion did not stay hidden. For long, rumors had already spread through the noble districts and whispers turned into sharp voices. In the shining halls of the alien court, the council gathered, their faces cold and eyes full of judgment. The council was made of the oldest and richest of Serenia's kind, beings who valued power, wealth, and pride above all. They looked down on every race weaker than their own, and to them, humans were nothing but laborers, fragile and unworthy of respect. One counselor, Lord Varick, slammed his hand against the glowing table. "This is madness," he said, his voice echoing. "A billionaire of our people allows a human servant to touch her child. Do you not see the insult to our honor?" Another, Lady Orthea, lifted her chin. "If we let this go unpunished, others may follow. Soon humans will think themselves equal. Soon they will believe they can stand beside us." Her words dripped with disgust. But not all voices agreed. A younger council member whispered cautiously, "Yet the reports say the child lives because of him. Can we deny what our own doctors failed to achieve?" But he was quickly silenced by glares. Back in her mansion, Serenia was summoned to appear before them. She stood tall in her finest garments, jewels glowing at her wrists, her heart steady though her mind was torn. She knew this would be a storm when she entered the grand chamber. The council sat in a half-circle, their sharp eyes watching. The room's silence pressed like weight on her shoulders. "Lady Serenia," Lord Varick began, his voice like stone. "You have allowed a human janitor to step where no human should. You have broken the order of our kind. Explain yourself." Serenia raised her head. "I have done what no doctor could. I have given my daughter a chance to smile. Is that a crime?" The chamber murmured. Some gasped at her boldness, but Orthea's eyes narrowed. "Your child's health is not worth the honor of our people. What example do you set letting a human pretend to heal where only our knowledge belongs?" Serenia's hands clenched, anger stirred in her chest. "That human has done nothing but show kindness, something even the richest of us have forgotten," she replied, her voice firm. The council erupted in disapproval, voices overlapping, calling her reckless, foolish, even dangerous. The sound shook the chamber, but Serenia did not lower her gaze. Finally, the High Elder raised his hand for silence, his voice slow and heavy. "Lady Serenia, you walk a thin path. If you continue to defy our traditions, you risk not only your honor, but your place among us." Serenia bowed slightly, but her heart burned with silent fire. She returned to her mansion with the words echoing in her ears. Threats wrapped in respect, warnings dressed as wisdom. That evening, she found Daniel sitting quietly by Alara's bed. He looked up, reading her troubled face at once. "They called you," he said, softly, not a question but a truth. "Yes," she answered, her voice bitter. "They see your presence as a stain. They want me to send you away." Daniel lowered his gaze. "I expected this. Humans are not welcome in places like this. Perhaps I should leave before it becomes worse for you." Before Serenia could answer, Alara's small voice cut through the silence. No, Daniel, don't go, she said, her hand clutching his sleeve. I feel better because of you. Please stay. Serenya's chest tightened. She looked at her daughter's fragile form, the glow in her eyes, the laughter that had returned only because of him, and she shook her head. No, Daniel. You will stay. I will not take away what gives my child life. Daniel's eyes softened, but there was pain there too. You are risking much, he whispered. I have risked nothing compared to losing her, Serenya replied, her voice fierce. Outside the nursery, the servants whispered louder than ever. Some admired Serenya's courage, others feared the wrath of the council. Tension grew in every corner of the mansion. Shadows stretched longer, as if danger itself was drawing near. Far above, in the council chambers, plans were already being made. Secret voices argued whether to shame Serenya in public or to strike quietly. Because one truth had settled in their hearts: if one human could prove valuable, if one billionaire could defy them, their entire order could begin to crumble. Back in her private room, Serenya stood before the great window, stars burning against the dark. She thought of the council's words, of Daniel's quiet strength, of Alara's fragile smile. She knew the storm was coming, yet in her heart she whispered, let it come, because she had chosen her path, and no threat could make her abandon it now. And in the quiet of the night, as Daniel kept watch beside Alara, he too felt the weight of unseen eyes. His past was catching up. The truth he had hidden was moving closer, and soon both Serenya and the council would learn it. The hidden truth. Mansion was no longer the same place it had once been. Silence still lived in its halls, but under that silence there was tension, a heavy weight pressing against every wall. Lady Serenya could feel it whenever she walked past the servants. Their eyes lowered, their whispers quiet but sharp. The council's threats had not left her mind. Their words echoed again and again. Honor above all, tradition above life. But Serenya had already chosen. She would not take Daniel away from her daughter, even if the whole galaxy turned against her. One night, after Alara had fallen asleep, Serenya asked Daniel to stay behind. They sat across from one another in the dim light of the nursery, the stars shining faintly through the glass walls. Serenya's voice was calm but firm. You are hiding something from me, Daniel. I see it in your eyes every time the past is mentioned. Who are you, truly? Daniel looked down, his rough hands tightening. For a long time he was silent, the kind of silence that felt like a battle within. At last he spoke, his voice low. I was not always a janitor, Lady Serenya. Once I was a healer among my own people, a field medic during the human war. Serenya's eyes narrowed. She leaned closer. The human war? The one our people crushed? Daniel nodded, his eyes heavy with memory. Yes, we lost everything. I was trained not in machines or cold science, but in care and patience, in listening to life itself. When the war ended, many of us were scattered, forgotten, unwanted. I found work where I could, cleaning floors, carrying loads, anything to survive. Serenya studied him in silence. The truth weighed on her. This man had lived through the war. He had seen what her people had done, and yet here he was, caring for her daughter. Why did you not tell me before? She asked softly. Daniel gave a bitter smile. Because truth is dangerous, Lady Serenya. If they knew I was once more than a janitor, they would not let me near your child. They would call me a threat, maybe even a spy, but I only wanted to serve quietly, to live with some small dignity. For the first time, Serenya saw not just kindness in his eyes, but pain, a deep wound that had never healed. She understood then why his hands were so steady, why his care was so different from her own doctor's. He had learned to heal in places where machines could not reach, in battlefields where lives slipped away unless held with both hands. She leaned back, her heart conflicted. Do you hate us for what was done to your people? Daniel shook his head slowly. Hate destroys the one who holds it. I have no strength left for hate. I only have strength for what is before me, and right now that is your daughter. His words struck her deeply. They were heavier than all. The council's speeches, purer than any vow she had heard from her own kind. She lowered her gaze, hiding the storm in her heart. The next day, Alara continued to grow stronger. She laughed more. She asked Daniel endless questions about Earth, about rivers, skies, and birds, things she had never seen. Serenia listened, quietly, a strange thought blooming in her mind. Perhaps the council was wrong. Perhaps humans were not weak, but something else entirely. Something her people feared because they could not control it. But danger was already moving. Serenia's rivals had heard of her defiance. One powerful family, jealous of her wealth and influence, decided to strike. They sent spies into the shadows of her mansion, watching Daniel, watching Alara, searching for weakness. One evening, Serenia noticed the shift. The halls felt colder, the servants more nervous. Daniel himself grew alert, his eyes scanning corners, as if expecting someone to appear. That night he came to Serenia's chamber, his voice low. "There is danger in your house, Lady Serenia. Someone watches us. I have felt it for days." Serenia stiffened, her instincts agreeing. "The council?" Daniel shook his head. "Perhaps, or perhaps your enemies, but they know your daughter's recovery has made you stronger, and they do not want that strength to last." Serenia's anger burned hot. "They would harm a child." Daniel's voice hardened. "In war, Lady Serenia, I learned there is nothing some will not do." She turned toward the window, the stars glowing cold, her heart a storm of fear and rage. She whispered, "If they touch her, I will burn them all." Daniel placed a steady hand on her arm, surprising her. "Your power may not be enough here, but I will protect her with my life." For a long moment, Serenia stared at him, a human, once her servant, now standing like a shield, and she realized the truth she had been avoiding. Her world was already changing, and the council would not forgive it. That night she watched Alara sleep, Daniel sitting silently nearby, and in the stillness Serenia whispered to herself, "The truth has been hidden too long, but soon the galaxy will see it. Humans are not what we believed." And as the shadows moved closer outside her mansion walls, the bond between billionaire child and human healer grew stronger, preparing them for a storm none of them could yet imagine. The threat in shadows. The nights around Lady Serenia's mansion grew heavier. The air itself seemed to hold a warning. The servants hurried more quickly through the halls, their eyes lowered as if they too could feel unseen eyes watching. Daniel noticed it first. Every creak of the walls, every shift of light through the tall windows. He had lived too long in dangerous places not to recognize the signs. Someone was near, someone with ill intent. One evening, as Alara drifted to sleep, Daniel stood by the doorway, his gaze sharp. He felt it again, the sense of being observed. He whispered to Serenia, "There are shadows moving in your house, not of your making." Serenia's lips pressed into a thin line. "My rivals," she answered, anger flickering in her eyes. "They see my daughter's recovery as a threat. They would sooner destroy her than allow me strength." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had seen this before on battlefields, enemies striking not with honor but with cruelty, and though he was only a human in their eyes, he would not let them harm the fragile girl who now laughed because of him. That night, the threat revealed itself while the halls slept. A group of masked figures crept through the gardens, their movements silent, their weapons glinting faintly under the moonlight, their orders clear: end the child, end the hope she represented. But Daniel was awake. He had taken to keeping watch, by Alara's door, his ears trained, his body tense. When he heard the faint scrape of glass, he moved without hesitation. The intruders slipped into the nursery, expecting weakness. But instead, they met Daniel, his frame tall in the shadows, his voice steady. "You will not touch her." They laughed at first, seeing only a human. "Step aside, Janitor," one hissed. "This is not your fight." But Daniel did not step aside. He moved with the precision of a man who had lived through war, his hands quick, his strikes efficient. He disarmed the first intruder before the others understood. The fight was not against a servant, but against a soldier. Alara woke with a frightened cry. Serenia rushed into the room, her eyes blazing with fury as she saw the scene. Daniel standing like a wall between the child and the intruders. "You dare enter my house?" Serenia's voice thundered, her alien power filling the air like fire. The intruders faltered, but one still raised his blade toward Daniel. In that instant, Serenya's wrath exploded. Energy burst from her hand, sending the attacker crashing into the wall. The others fled, but her guards, awakened by the noise, captured two before they could escape. The danger was over, but the silence that followed was heavier than any sound. Daniel stood breathing hard, his arm bruised, his shirt torn. Serenya looked at him with shock and something more. Respect? You fought like a warrior, she whispered, her voice low. Not like a janitor. Daniel did not answer at once, his eyes still scanning the room, making sure Alara was safe. Only then did he turn. I told you, Lady Serenya. I once was more. I am only what I must be now, and tonight I had to be her shield. Alara clung to him, her small arms around his neck. Daniel saved me, she whispered, tears in her eyes. Serenya's heart ached, both with relief and with the sharp truth. Her daughter's life now rested not in her wealth, not in her power, but in the hands of a human. And for the first time she admitted it to herself, without shame. The captured intruders were dragged. Before her, their masks ripped away. They were not strangers, but men tied to her rivals, powerful names in the court. Serenya's fury burned. You dared strike at my child, she said coldly. You will not leave here alive. But Daniel placed a hand on her arm, stopping her, his voice calm but firm. Killing them now will only spark open war in the council. Better to let their shame be seen, let the truth of their cowardice spread. She stared at him, stunned. Her instincts had cried for blood, yet his wisdom rang true. He was teaching her, a billionaire who had ruled with wealth, the strength of patience. By morning, news had spread. The attack was whispered across the city. Many nobles shook their heads in secret, ashamed at the thought of harming a child. Others, however, grew angrier, blaming Serenya for letting a human stand where no human should. Serenya sat by Alara's side, Daniel standing quietly nearby, her thoughts heavy. She knew the storm had only grown. Her rivals would not stop. The council would not forgive, and yet she felt no regret, because for the first time in many years she was fighting for something real. That night, when the halls grew quiet again, Serenya turned to Daniel, her voice low. You have risked your life for her, though you owe us nothing. Why? Daniel's gaze was steady. Because I know what it is to lose everything. I will not let her suffer the same fate, not while I draw breath. His words settled into her heart like fire. She realized then that his place in her house was no longer that of a servant. He had become protector, teacher, and perhaps something greater. But far away in the Grand Council chambers, plans were already shifting. Serenya had defied them openly now, and with a human at her side, she was becoming something they could not control. And that was a danger they would never allow. The trial of loyalty. The council could not stay silent after the attack on Serenya's mansion. Their pride was wounded. Their order threatened. Rumors of a human defending an alien billionaire's child had spread like fire, and soon whispers turned into outrage. They summoned Lady Serenya to stand before them once more, this time not in quiet warning but in public trial. Nobles from across the city gathered in the grand chamber, their jeweled robes glittering, their faces eager for scandal. Serenya entered with her head high, though her heart was heavy. Daniel walked behind her, silent as always, his eyes steady, his presence calm. Alara had begged for him to stay, her small voice trembling. Don't let them take Daniel away, Mother. Serenya had promised, though she did not know if she could keep it. The High Elder's voice cut through the air like a blade. Lady Serenya, you have brought shame to our kind, not once but twice. You kept a human in your house. You allowed him to touch your daughter, and now you let him fight in your name. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some nodding, some shaking their heads. Serenya felt their eyes pierce her, but she stood firm. He has done what none of you could. He gave my daughter back her smile, her strength, her will to live. Lord Varric rose, his face twisted with anger. Enough of this weakness, humans. Our tools, nothing more. You insult us by giving him honor, by speaking of him as if he were equal. Serenya's voice rose sharp and clear. If equality is an insult, then perhaps it is your pride that blinds you, not my actions. The chamber roared, nobles shouting, some in support, most in rage. Daniel stood silent at her back, but his eyes never wavered. At last, the High Elder raised his hand. Silence fell, his voice deep and cold. Lady Serenia, we give you a choice. Send this human away forever, or lose your place among us. Your title, your wealth, your power, all that you have built will be stripped. The words struck like thunder. The nobles leaned forward, eager, waiting, some smiling cruelly. This was their chance to see her fall. Serenia's heart thundered. For a moment she thought of her vast fortune, her name carved into the very bones of the city, her seat among the most powerful of her kind, all of it balanced on this choice. She turned, her gaze falling on Daniel. He did not plead, he did not move, but in his eyes she saw the truth. He was ready to leave, ready to sacrifice himself for her. His lips almost formed the words, "Let me go." But he stayed silent. Then, her eyes shifted to Alara, sitting in the chamber, wrapped in fine cloth, her small hand clutching the edge of her chair, her eyes wide with fear, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Don't let them take him, Mother." And in that instant, Serenia knew. There was no choice at all. She faced the council, her voice calm but filled with fire. "I will not send him away. I will not betray the one who saved my daughter. If that means I lose my title, then so be it. Strip me if you dare, but know this. He is worth more than all your empty pride." Bureau chamber erupted, gasps and shouts clashing like waves. Some cried in outrage, others murmured in shock. The High Elder's eyes narrowed, fury in his voice. "You defy us openly?" "I do," Serenia answered without flinching. The High Elder struck the table, the sound echoing. "Then you are no longer of us. Your name is broken, your seat removed, your wealth seized. From this moment you are cast down." The nobles cheered, their voices rising, hungry for her fall. But Serenia stood tall, Daniel behind her, Alara clinging to her mother's hand. Together they walked from the chamber, not broken, but stronger. Outside, the city buzzed with shock. Crowds gathered, some mocking, some whispering in awe. Never had a billionaire turned against the council. Never had a human been defended at such a cost. Back at the mansion which no longer belonged to her, Serenia sat quietly, her eyes heavy but unbowed. Daniel approached her, his voice soft. "You did not have to lose everything for me." She looked at him, her voice steady. "I did not lose everything. I still have her smile, and the one who gave it back. What is wealth compared to that?" Daniel lowered his gaze, humbled, his heart heavy. "Then I will stay not as a servant, but as a man who owes you loyalty." Serenia shook her head. "No, Daniel, not loyalty but choice. You owe me nothing. But if you choose to stand with us, then we face whatever comes together." Alara climbed into Daniel's arms, smiling weakly but brightly. "We're a family now," she whispered. Daniel held her carefully, his eyes meeting Serenia's. And in that moment he felt the truth. The galaxy had turned against them, but within these walls, they had found something stronger than power. Yet far away in the dark corners of the Empire, enemies gathered. The Council's wrath was not finished. Serenia's defiance had lit a fire that would spread, and soon the storm would break upon them. The unseen future. The fall of Lady Serenia shook the city like an earthquake. One day she had been among the highest of nobles, her name spoken with fear and respect. The next she was stripped of wealth, her seat taken, her power scattered. Yet even in her downfall, her presence carried something the council could not crush. For outside the glittering towers, ordinary people whispered her name differently now. Not as a cold billionaire, but as a mother who chose her child above pride, and as the woman who stood beside a human when all others spat at his kind. Daniel noticed it in the streets when they walked together. The servants who had once bowed in fear now looked at him with quiet respect. Merchants lowered their voices when he passed, not mocking but wondering. Could it be true that a human had shown strength no alien could deny? Inside their smaller home, far humbler than the great mansion, they found a strange peace, Alara's. Laughter filled the rooms, weak at first but growing stronger. Every day she walked a little farther. Every day her smile shone a little brighter. Serenia often sat watching her daughter, her heart full, even stripped of jewels and status. She felt richer than she had ever been, Daniel's quiet presence steadied her, his stories and gentle ways building a life that was not built on gold, but on trust. Yet the shadow of the council was never far. Serenia knew they would not forget. Her defiance, she knew the storm still gathered, her rivals still plotted, but she also knew she no longer stood alone. One evening, as stars burned in the night sky, Serenia spoke softly to Daniel. "They will come for us again, sooner or later. They cannot allow what we represent." Daniel nodded, his voice calm. "I know, but they underestimate one thing. They think strength is only power, but true strength is choice. You chose your daughter. You chose to see me not as a servant but as a man. That is something they will never understand." His words gave her courage, though her heart still carried fear. The weeks passed, and soon Alara was well enough to walk freely. She danced clumsily through the small house, laughing as Daniel clapped for her. "See, mother, I can walk now," she shouted with joy. Serenia's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of pride. She bent down, holding her child close, whispering, "Yes, my star, you can walk, and one day you will soar." But outside their happiness, the galaxy stirred. Rumors spread quickly of the fallen billionaire who kept a human at her side. In distant colonies, humans heard these stories too. Stories of one of their own who had been more than a servant. In the shadows of taverns and stations, human workers whispered with hope, "If one of us could matter to them, maybe we are not as weak as they say." It was a dangerous thought, and the council feared it more than any weapon. At last the High Elder gathered the council in secret, his voice filled with bitterness. "Serenia has planted a seed. It will grow if we let it. The people are watching. Even humans whisper her name. We must crush this before it spreads." But crushing hope was never so simple, because every day Alara's laughter carried farther. Every day Serenia walked beside Daniel in public, unashamed, and people saw with their own eyes what the council denied. One night, as Serenia sat at her window, Alara asleep nearby, Daniel keeping quiet watch, she whispered to him, "Do you think we can survive this?" Daniel looked at her, his gaze steady. "Survival is not enough, Lady Serenia. You have already changed more than you realize. They may take more from us, but they cannot erase what has been seen. One human gave life back to your child, and that truth will live no matter what they try." His words filled her with strange peace. For once she allowed herself to hope not only for her daughter, but for something greater. Days turned into weeks, and soon, into months. Serenia and Daniel stood together against every whisper, every cold stare. Though stripped of rank, she found herself richer in ways the council could never understand. Alara grew stronger. Her small steps became firm, her laughter brighter. Every time she reached for Daniel's hand, every time she called him by name, Serenia felt the truth. He was no longer just a protector, he was part of their family. And so the unseen future stretched before them, filled with both danger and promise. Serenia knew the council would strike again, but she no longer feared them. She had found something they could not touch, something beyond wealth and tradition. For in a galaxy built on pride and power, one human janitor had shown them all that true worth was not measured in titles, but in love and loyalty, in the smile of a child who once had no hope. And as the stars burned bright above their small home, Serenia whispered to herself, "Let the council come. Let the galaxy watch. We will not bow again." Daniel, standing at her side, simply nodded, his eyes on the stars. The unseen future belonged not to the council, not to the nobles, but to those who dared to care. And that was a power no empire could destroy.